Stuck on one. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Steamboat Institute Facebook Live. We are so glad to be with you again today. I'm Erica Anderson, your digital director here at the Steamboat Institute, and I'm excited today to talk with Jameson Broggi, who's a member of our Emerging Leaders Advisory Council. Jameson, thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks, Erica. Appreciate it.
We are hoping that we don't have technical difficulties. For those that are watching, we've had some struggles getting here, so far so good. Jameson, tell us a little bit about yourself. We have so many great members of our council, and you are one of them. So tell us a little bit about who you are, where you live, and what your background is.
So I'm Jameson Broggi. I'm from South Carolina, born and raised in South Carolina. The past 3 years, I've lived in Virginia for law school. So I'm from Beaufort, South Carolina. I went to the University of South Carolina, lived in Columbia for about 6 years. After I graduated from undergrad, I worked in the South Carolina State Senate for 2.5 years. And the last 3 years, I've been in law school at the Antonin Scalia Law School at Jameson University in Arlington, Virginia. And I just graduated from law school. I'm really glad to be done. Mm-hmm. The one thing about law school, it's very anticlimactic when you graduate it, because as soon as you graduate, you have to study for the bar exams. That's what I'm doing every single day right now.
Oh, that's what I was going to ask, if you had taken it yet.
I have not yet. And fortunately, I have a spot because a lot of jurisdictions canceled their bar exams because of COVID. But I have a spot in the jurisdictions that's open. So you think that's a given, but I'm grateful just to have a spot to be able to take it.
So how long do you study for that?
It's about 2 months every day. It's about 9-10 hours every single day from the lawyers that have told me of what they recommend to pass it. Because some states, the passage rate sometimes will only be 60-70% of takers will actually pass it, which you don't want to graduate from law school and then not pass the bar exam.
Right.
So that's it's a lot right now, but I'll be glad when it's behind me.
And what kind of law do you want to practice?
Well, it's interesting. Thanks, Erica. One of the things that what made me want to go to law school is one of the things we're talking about today, which is kind of neat to be able to talk about that. I love our country. We live in a great country. I'm very thankful to be an American. But you think about it, well, what makes America great, and why are we free, and why do we have the blessings that we have? And in our country, we think about its founding principles. Well, where do we find those? The principles of what America is built on. For us, we're in a unique spot where we can look to the birth certificate of our country that we actually have, the Declaration of Independence, and we read, "We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they're endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, and among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, and that government exists to secure those rights." And that's really unique in world history, when you have a country founded on a principle, not on some ethnic group, not on some race, but on an ideal that anyone can embrace this, and it's allowed us to be free. So if that's the case, if America is founded on an idea and not on some group, what does that mean? It means you have to learn how to be an American. You're not born knowing how to be free. You have to learn how to be an American. And so you asked me what interested me in going to law school. And it was something I had found out that for 96 years in South Carolina, state law requires that all public colleges must require students before they can graduate to take a year-long class on America's founding documents, the U.S. Constitution, the Declaration of Independence, and the Federalist Papers. That's a requirement for graduation. The problem is that most of the colleges in South Carolina, not all, but most, are choosing to break the law. And working on this issue and some of the things we'll talk about today, and for this segment, is one of the things that made me want to go to law school. I said, well, if I want to keep working on this issue of what we're talking about today, it's like I need to be better prepared. And that was one of the things that made me want to go to law school.
Well, okay, so let's get into that. You obviously have interest in it because you went to one of these schools that we're going to talk about, and you are from the state of South Carolina. So tell us what is happening.
So I'm from South Carolina. I love our state. So the state law requires, hey, you have to study a year-long class in these founding documents. What we're talking about now, I've been working on this issue now for almost 7 years. That's a long time.
Wow.
I remember when I was a student, an undergraduate student at the University of South Carolina. I was 20 years old. I found out, okay, this is the law, but the university is not complying with the law. So at that time, I said, okay, well, this isn't right. University's obliged to follow the law. And so at that time, I remember I said, okay, maybe the university doesn't know about the law, because you assume the best out of people. Maybe they don't know. So I called, I made an appointment with the president. Took a long time to be able to do that. You had to meet with their first officers first. But I did that because I felt I had a moral obligation to go through the proper chain of command first before you complain about something, because maybe they don't know. And we met, and very respectful, but they said, well, this is an old law, and because it's old, we don't think we're obligated to follow it. And we don't want to change up our curriculum that we already have, which you think the state law would trump anything, but they just said, no, we're not going to do that. And, I might add, I had a disagreement, but when I had a disagreement, I picked up the phone, put on a coat and tie, and made an appointment. You see, sometimes you have college students, when they're upset about something, they protest and all these different things, and that's great. And then, people need to be heard, but there's nothing beats talking to someone one-on-one and making an appointment and doing it the right way.
Yeah, it's almost like people forgotten that you can actually do that.
Yeah, and
you
people
can also write letters to the editor and things like that, old school.
So when I found out, okay, this is a law, it's being broken, and now the university knows about it. So my next step was to talk to, okay, what is the ultimate authority over a college? If it's a public college, let's think about that. Who has the ultimate authority? Where's the president of the university? What governs the president? There's a board of trustees. What governs the board of trustees? Well, different states are going to set up public colleges differently, but in South Carolina, most of the trustees at public colleges are elected by the state legislature. So I started meeting with state legislators. These were people I hadn't met before. I called. Some of them weren't even my members, that I wasn't even in their districts, but I made appointments. I got a lot of no's, a lot of people who wouldn't meet with me. I got a lot of people who would meet with me. And at that time, I had a whole team of state legislators contact the university and say, hey, this is a law. It's being broken. It should be followed. Amazingly enough, this is 2013. A state senator wrote to the president of the University of South Carolina. A state senator wrote to the president of Clemson University. The president of the University of South Carolina, for example, wrote back, called the state law archaic, and refused to comply. Now, I don't know about you, but I don't think studying our founding documents is archaic. I think it's a good thing. I think now more than ever, people need to read our country's founding documents and the founding principles that are in those founding documents. So he said, we're not going to comply. He goes, but we follow the spirit of the law. This is, by the way, what I'm citing. This is a public letter. You can, if you Google it, it'll come right up. And the president of the University of South Carolina, this is the former president, Dr. Harris Pastides, said, while we don't comply with the law, we follow the spirit of the law by handing out pocket-sized constitutions on Constitution Day. Okay, well, if they're going to follow this logic, are you going to teach chemistry by handing out copies of the periodic table on World Science Day on November 10th? I mean, that's not how you teach a class. But he said, if you amend the law in 10 ways, he said this in his letter, he goes, I'll comply, which is kind of odd to think about. We'll follow the law based on our approximation of the convenience of doing so, and you change it the way we want. But here's what we did. We thought politically the best way to do it is like we said, we'll call your bluff. You say, well, what were these ways you want to amend it? Well, for example, the current law also requires that students be loyal to the founding documents. And he says, well, that's problematic. That's old. That's outdated. That's unconstitutional. Well, instead of fighting on that issue, we just said, okay, we'll introduce a bill and we'll delete that provision that in addition to taking the class, you also have to be loyal to the documents. We said, we agree with you. We'll take it out. There were some other provisions that said the state superintendent of education shall implement the law. That was kind of like an outdated government provision. We removed it. There was a series of things, and we introduced a piece of legislation. It's an active piece of legislation. It's still pending in the General Assembly. It's passed the Senate after a 3-hour debate. It's passed the state Senate, and it does that, and it calls the bluff of the universities and says, we'll amend it just the way you want. Well, here's what's interesting. We wrote the legislation at their request. It passes the Senate, and both the University of South Carolina and Clemson University have lobbied against the legislation. So you have to wonder, was there objection to the law, these technical objections that they said were the objections? Because we said, we're well happy to work with you. We will compromise with you. Or is it some other objection of why they don't want to comply with the law?
Right. Yeah. I mean, it just seems like they were hoping that you would go away, basically. but you were like, no, we're not going to do that. So now what is, looking at the country, is South Carolina different than the rest of the country, or is this a requirement in other states as well?
So a lot of the universities, the public universities, they think they're their own entities, and if you're a private university, you are. If
Right.
you're a public entity, you're under the authority of the state, which is governed by the legislature. And they oftentimes say it's very inappropriate for a state to implement or have any control over their curriculum choices, which is kind of odd to think that a public college can't have input by the public. And also
Right.
that these public colleges were created by the state. So if the state wanted to, they could do away with them. They exist to serve the state. So they say, well, this is inappropriate. This is, only the faculty can make the decisions over curriculum. It doesn't matter what the state law says. And so you said, what are other states doing? What's happening nationally? Well, this is not unique. So you have 50 states, 8 states in the country require public colleges to require students to take a class on America's founding documents. Now, each state law, because they're each different, they're a little bit different. Some require more instruction than the other. For example, Texas requires that students to take 12 credit hours, 4 classes.
Wow.
6 on American history, 6 on American government. Some states require less. Some states only require a year, like South Carolina. It varies, but at a minimum of these 8 states, all these state laws are implemented by the public colleges with a minimum of a 3 credit hour class.
Wow.
So the University of South Carolina says we pass out pocket-sized constitutions. Clemson University says we don't do that. We require students to watch an online video for an hour. The law requires a year-long class. We require students to watch an online video for an hour. That's sufficient to a year. The law requires a successful examination at the end. They say, well, we have students pass a 20-question quiz that you have an unlimited number of attempts to take. Well, I've never taken a test in my life where I have an unlimited number of attempts.
Yeah.
I didn't think that. I thought that's what made it a test. But nationally, out of these 8 states that have laws like this, in every state except South Carolina, every single public college complies with the state law without issue through the medium of a minimum of a 3 credit hour course. That's what's happening nationally. Only in South Carolina do you have the majority of colleges choosing to break the law. And that's all the piece we put out by Steamboat a few days ago that references this. It links to a survey. If people were saying, hey, I want to see what is this state law? What are the colleges are doing? We have that all documented for people to see what's happening in the other states.
You wrote a great piece on that for us, and I know you've written about it for the Daily Signal as well. I think it's funny. You mentioned in your blog post some of the courses that they do offer at Clemson, and I think the other one. Can you tell us what are some of those courses that they think are important to offer and give students the opportunity to take?
So it's really funny. So you have to think, okay, what is the priority of the universities? I don't know why they're choosing to break the law. I can only surmise that they don't think it's a priority. So as I stated, they give all these objections. The University of South Carolina gave 10 in the former president's letter from 2014. He said these are the 10 objections. Oh, after we introduced our legislation that passed the Senate, by the way, that answered all their objections, then we get new objections. And the new objection was the University of South Carolina said it would cost $3.4 million to comply with the law. Now, and Clemson University said it would cost over $1 million to comply with the law. Well, I'd make a couple of points. Number one, the legislation reduces the amount of instruction that the law requires. So the law requires a year-long class. The legislation cuts it in half to a 3 credit hour class. So that's interesting to me because if the law requires a year-long class, this should cut in half whatever your current budget is because we're reducing it.
Mm-hmm.
So it's interesting that you're saying this costs new money. So and now you ask, well, what are these new courses? That they do have funds to spend on. So they say, well, we can't teach the Constitution because it costs too much money. Well, I'm all about cutting costs. Here's what they do have money to spend on. So these are real classes I'm about to mention from the University of South Carolina. And these aren't required classes, but these are electives that the universities offer. So I'm not saying they're not required, but funds are spent on them to make them available to students. Well, for example, at South Carolina, you can take a class on tailgating 101.
Oh my gosh, how is that a class?
I didn't know you needed to go to a class to learn how to tailgate. You can take Viking mythology as one of them.
Wow.
Viking mythologies is a 3-credit-hour class, a full semester, but somehow they can't get around to doing what state law requires them to do, and that's teach the Constitution, the Declaration of Independence. History of the Devil, that's the name of a real class. Take a class in the history of the devil, but we don't have the funds to require students to take a class on the founding documents. Clemson, for its own part, you can take a class in turkey hunting. I didn't know people at Clemson needed to learn how to do it in class. I figured they already knew how to do it. You can take turkey hunting at Clemson. You can take jazz dance. There's a class it's offered at Clemson called Sexuality in the Cinema. Just these classes, even if you may think they're fun courses to take, in the broad scheme of things, they're unimportant compared to our U.S. Constitution, our Declaration of Independence, the people for over 200 years have died to defend these founding principles that these founding fathers risked their lives to put down. You know, there's a famous letter that one founding father wrote to another years later. He goes, "Do you remember that day in Philadelphia when we signed the Declaration of Independence?" He goes, "We thought we were signing our death warrants." In South Carolina, there's 4 signers from the Declaration of Independence. 3 of them were captured during the War for Independence. So these other classes that they're offering, Clemson, USC, maybe they're fun courses. Maybe Tailgating 101 is a fun course to take, but it's unimportant compared to our founding documents. So I wish they would comply with the law first before, and then if you have extra funds, then you can, then waste them on Tailgating 101 after that, after you comply with the law.
I'm just trying to imagine what they teach in that class, like how to barbecue and like shotgun a beer. Like,
oh yeah, they say it includes safe food practices is the part of the course description. Maybe that's important. Wow. They don't mention libations, but I understand that a lot of people who tailgate, that's part of it. I guess that's
I've
part
heard.
of the unearned credit. I don't know.
So you've kind of described, why it's so important to learn about the Constitution. It seems very obvious. And you have been in college and law school much more recently than I. I've never been to law school. I'll clarify. What I didn't prep you for this, but I'm just curious, just like in your speaking with people and just being in school recently, like what is your impression of what kind of knowledge people just do have of these things? Like, it doesn't seem like it's very good from my understanding.
Well, I guess it depends who you're hanging around. I would say, I was at the Antonin Scalia Law School, so it was named after the late Justice Scalia, so there was a better understanding of it there.
True.
But there's a lot of, there's one survey that's written. We cite to it in the Steamboat article. If you go to Steamboat Institute's website, it's right up there at the top. That article cites that 60% of Americans cannot name the 3 branches of government. 60%. Many of them can't name a single right in the Bill of Rights, yet 1 in 10 Americans, according to one survey, think the right to own a pet is in the Bill of Rights. So the ignorance is definitely there. And, I haven't been paid a dime for any of the things I've done trying to lobby to get the founding documents observed. I'm just a citizen. I'm not a registered lobbyist. I've just done it on my own time. While I've been in law school full time, I've been doing this on the side.
That's crazy.
And it's really been very difficult because the universities, they have paid staff that work on this full time. I wrote an article for the Daily Signal from the Heritage Foundation in March highlighting this. And I'll give you an example. Clemson University, their top lobbyist gets paid over $240,000 a year. Their second lobbyist in chief gets paid $120,000 a year. You say, well, what are they doing? What are they doing? What are these lobbyists doing? They're lobbying against America's founding documents being taught to college students in a required course, which is already required by the law. So how do we know that? Well, using some of the new skills I've learned, I made a request for public records from Clemson University under the South Carolina Freedom of Information Act. And I said, please provide me all your records of your lobbying activity on this bill in the General Assembly. I received a huge trove back from Clemson's General Counsel's office. And in that trove, we find that the chief lobbyist for Clemson is asking legislators to repeal in its entirety the law that requires college instruction on the founding documents. And so where's this coming from? Where are these instructions coming from? Well, we have in email. Again, this is if you Google Clemson University Daily Signal, the article from the Heritage Foundation website will come right up. We cite to all these public records. Anyone who wants to look them up, this is all public records. So this isn't from private meetings. These are all public records. We have the provost of Clemson University instructing the lobbyists to kill the bill. And that's not my words, that's his. He uses the word kill. Well, I don't know how you interpret kill than any other thing is that we want this to go away.
Yeah.
So as you highlighted, yes, a lot of people don't know these founding documents. People need to know them. It seems now more than ever they need to know them. And I have just on my own time, I don't get paid anything. I love our country, so I've volunteered and said, okay, I'll help. What can I do?
Yeah.
And you're up against, University of South Carolina, the largest university in the state, Clemson University, the second largest university in the state, with taxpayer-funded salaries that can lobby against America's founding documents being taught in a college class full time. I'm in law school doing this on the side, and we got the bill through the Senate. We still beat them in the Senate. It's pending in the House right now. I don't know what the House of Representatives will do. That's up to them, what they choose to do. With COVID, everything has been kind of shut down. So it's, they've been suspended in their session. So I don't know what they'll choose to do. I hope that the South Carolina House of Representatives passes this Senate bill that's already passed the Senate and sends it to Governor Henry McMaster, which would update this 96-year-old law in South Carolina law that 7 other states have that requires college students to study America's founding documents.
Seems like we need to have that requirement in the other states as well. All the other states. Because it's just like, you're hearing obviously right now, like so much negativity about our country's founding and so many people are arguing about things, and yet they don't even have the basic foundation to know what they're actually arguing supposedly against when it comes to some of these things. It's really shocking, the lack of knowledge. And I feel like it really should start in high school, honestly. Like that should be first required there and then in college. That makes a lot of sense. But I think there's not a lot of people out there that have this kind of grit and determination that you have about something that, you're just doing it out of your true concern for the country and concern for the knowledge of our country's founding, for the citizens that live here. So I'll just say thank you for your hard work, just on behalf of probably a lot of people that are really appreciative of what you're doing, bringing light to this. I think it's really important to talk about it and get it out there. So because most people wouldn't even know what was happening, unless we were telling them.
Well, thanks for help getting out the word. I love our country, and I'm very grateful. And that's the way we can hopefully win the battle in the end. Is when people hear about it and are able to help. So I'm grateful to you for that.
Yeah. Well, Jamison, thank you so much for joining us and just filling us in on this. I'm sure people are going to want to keep up with you and find out what happens. I know it's sort of like you don't know at this point, but we appreciate your work. We appreciate you being a part of our Emerging Leaders Council. Your input is really invaluable. So thanks for spending your time with us tonight.
Thanks, Erica. I really appreciate it.